So here we have a lot of the back muscles. So these are kind of opposite to the abdominal muscles, minus the quadratus lumborum. But all these muscles are going to contribute to gross extension of the spine. We're going to cover this in more detail later, but we have the lats here. They are a weak spinal extensor as well. But underneath the lats, these posterior serratus muscles, it kind of helps, control some movement of the lower rib cage. So generally speaking, to some extent, all these ones, we're going to focus mostly on the thoracic and lumbar spine. All these muscles here are generally going to contribute to like a gross extension movement of the spine when they all function together. So anytime you do any kind of back extension, deadlift, any kind of spinal extension exercise, you're generally going to train all of these muscles right here through this gross extension pattern. But if we look a little more carefully, we can also see that these muscles do control movement of the rib cage to some degree, as they will have attachment points kind of all along the rib cage. The other thing too is these muscles are also the next movement they're going to be largely responsible for is going to be lateral flexion of the spine. So anytime you flex one way or the other, you're going to be activating very strongly the spinal erectors on that side of the spine. We'll kind of get rid of those real quick. Now for these muscles, we kind of get into what we commonly refer to as like the deep spinal muscles. So we have the multifidus muscle, and a lot of these are just made up of a lot of really small muscles that we kind of just group into one. So we have this multifidus muscle. This kind of fills in this groove in this whole vertebral column here. But a lot of these muscles here, if you kind of look at all these different attachment points, although they all contribute largely to spine extension, based on all these attachment points, you kind of see how they sort of crisscross in along with one another. What this does is this helps stabilize each individual segment of the spine across various planes of motion. Now, given the fact that it's very difficult to isolate any one of these muscles, and it would be extremely impractical, if we want to train kind of all the muscles of the spine, we really just want to make sure that we're training all motions of the spine through flexion, extension, lateral flexion, along with rotation. Options for training the spine through extension include dynamic versions. We have Jefferson deadlifts, any kind of back extension, good morning variation where we do allow the spine to actually flex and extend under load. For the most part, I usually prefer to train those motions on either 30, 45 degree back extension machine or a GHD, because then you can train that movement without as much compressive force on the spine, and then you can activate the muscles much more strongly. In terms of isometric versions, you have your deadlifts, your squats, your traditional back extension variations where you're keeping the spine neutral and you're only allowing for motion of the hip. Those are all going to be isometric methods of kind of training this musculature here. And then all your lateral flexion exercises, it's going to be very similar to movements that you use to train the quadratus lumborum. Any kind of side plank, side crunch variation. And then for rotation, you have your standard like cable rotation, stuff like that. If you really want to get after the spinal erectors, a lot of times you can set up certain rotation exercises on like a GHD machine where you're still allowing your body to face towards the floor, but you're holding onto a dumbbell or something, and then you're kind of rotating up to the side with it, and you have to work both sides in those kinds of motions.